What is the shadow within you? No more traffic, no more calls, just you and yourself. And if you're brave enough to listen, you might begin to hear something soft, something deep inside stirring, a part of you that feels raw, emotional, maybe even a little frightening. Carl Jung called this part the shadow. It's not evil. It's not something you need to destroy. It's simply the part of you that you've tried to forget, the side you've hidden, the emotions you've denied. It might be the fear of being abandoned, the anger you were never allowed to express, the envy, the shame, the desires, things society told you were unacceptable. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And so I ask you gently, what is your shadow whispering to you? Have you ever felt like you're being pulled by something invisible? Like you're living a life you didn't fully choose? In today's video, we'll step into that hidden space together, into the part of your soul that you've turned away from for too long. Because the truth is, your shadow isn't something to fear. It's something to understand, and perhaps even something to embrace. Understanding Carl Jung's shadow theory. So let's begin. Let's take a quiet step into the world of Carl Jung, a man who didn't just study the mind, he listened to the soul. Jung believed that deep within each of us, there are parts we're proud to show, and parts we desperately try to hide. The parts we show are easy to love, our kindness, our patience, our loyalty. But the parts we hide, that's where the shadow begins. According to Jung, the shadow is the unconscious part of our personality. It contains everything we've rejected or suppressed, thoughts, emotions, desires, and instincts we believe are unacceptable. Maybe you were taught that crying makes you weak, that being angry makes you a bad person, that wanting too much attention makes you selfish. So over time, you buried those pieces. You tucked them away, hoping they'd disappear. But here's the truth Jung discovered. Those parts never really go away. They simply slip into the shadows, waiting. And the more you avoid them, the louder they become. They show up in unexpected ways, in the arguments that spiral out of control, in the jealousy you don't want to admit, in the guilt that clings to your chest long after the moment has passed. Jung said that we don't become whole by chasing perfection. We become whole by embracing our imperfections, especially the ones we've tried to hide. The shadow is not the enemy, it's the doorway to healing. But first, we need to understand how it forms. From childhood, we are shaped by parents, teachers, religion, culture. We're rewarded for being good and punished for being bad. We learn which parts of ourselves are loved and which ones are shamed, so we adapt. We create a version of ourselves that others will accept. That mask, the person we think we should be, is what Jung called the persona. It's not fake, it's just incomplete. Because behind the persona, the shadow quietly collects everything that doesn't fit the mold. If you were told not to cry, your sadness goes into the shadow. If you were told to stay small, your ambition goes into the shadow. If you were told to always be polite, your anger goes into the shadow. Piece by piece, you lose touch with your wholeness, and eventually, you forget what you left behind. But the shadow doesn't forget you. And here's where it gets even more interesting. What we deny in ourselves, we often project onto others. If you've suppressed your anger, you might see others as too aggressive. If you've hidden your sadness, you might resent people who seem too emotional. If you've buried your need for love, you might push away those who offer it. This is the shadow in action, speaking through judgment, criticism, and discomfort. It's how your unconscious tries to get your attention, and it will keep showing up until you finally turn inward, until you say, "I see you. I'm listening. I'm ready to understand." That's when transformation begins. You see, Jung didn't want us to fight our darkness. He wanted us to integrate it, to make peace with it, to understand that the shadow isn't just about pain or trauma. It's also about potential, your creativity, your courage, your fire, your truth. All of it can be buried there too. Think of the shadow like a box in the attic, locked away for years. Yes, there may be things inside that are hard to look at, but there are also forgotten treasures. Parts of you that are still waiting to be reclaimed, still waiting to be loved. And when you begin the process of shadow work, when you start to face those hidden parts with compassion instead of shame, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to live as a whole person, not just the polished, socially acceptable version of you, but the real you. And that's what Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming your truest self. Not perfect, not pure, but whole. So if you've ever felt like something inside you is aching to be heard, if you've ever felt like you're tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of trying to be good all the time, know this: you're not broken. You're just being invited. Invited to step into your shadow, not with fear, but with curiosity, honesty, and a quiet kind of courage. How the shadow shows up in everyday life. The thing about the shadow is, it doesn't wait for a formal invitation. It finds its way into your day, quietly, cleverly, without you even realizing it. And before you know it, you're reacting in ways that feel unlike you. You say something hurtful, and later you wonder, why did I say that? You avoid someone you care about, and you ask, why am I pulling away? You feel jealous, defensive, easily irritated. But the emotion feels bigger than the situation. This is how the shadow speaks. It's not always loud. It doesn't always show up in dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, or a habit you've had for years, or a story you keep telling yourself, one where you're always the one who has to stay strong, or always the one who gets overlooked. Let's take a closer look. When you're triggered by someone else's behavior, especially something small, that's a clue. That flash of irritation, that overreaction, that cold withdrawal, that might not be about them. It might be about a part of yourself you've disowned. The woman who feels jealous of someone's success might be burying her own forgotten ambitions. The man who harshly judges others for being too emotional might be suppressing his own grief. The person who always keeps the peace, who avoids conflict at all costs, might be hiding deep anger they never learned how to express. These patterns often start early. As children, we adapt to survive. If anger brought punishment, we learned to stay quiet. If crying brought shame, we learned to shut down our feelings. If being too joyful, too curious, or too loud made others uncomfortable, we dimmed our light, and we carried those adaptations into adulthood. We became good at playing roles, but deep down, we know when something feels off. We know when we're not being true to ourselves, even if we can't name what's missing. That unease, that emptiness, that why do I feel stuck question. That's the shadow knocking at the door. Sometimes the shadow shows up in the body, a tight chest, a clenched jaw, chronic fatigue, not always because of physical illness, sometimes because emotions have nowhere else to go. They've been pushed down for too long, and now they're asking to be heard. Jung believed that when the shadow isn't acknowledged, it becomes destructive. It sabotages relationships. It distorts our choices. It drives addictions, avoidance, and self-sabotage. But when we begin to recognize it, gently, without judgment, we open the door to real healing. And this healing often starts with something surprisingly simple: awareness. Just noticing. Not fixing, not fighting, not labeling yourself as bad or broken, but simply asking, where might this reaction be coming from? Whose voice is this? Mine or someone else's? What have I been told not to feel? Sometimes you'll realize that a habit you thought was part of your personality is really just protection. That the anger you've tried to hide is really your power, waiting to be claimed. That the tears you've been holding back are the doorway to release. The more we understand our own patterns, the less we project them onto others. We stop blaming, we start owning. And in that space, something incredible happens. We begin to see other people differently too. We recognize that they have shadows as well. that their pain, their defenses, their distance often come from the same place ours does: wounds, fear, longing. The more compassionate we are with our own shadow, the more compassion we naturally extend to others. And this is what Jung meant when he said that the shadow, when integrated, becomes a source of great energy and renewal. It no longer has to hide. It no longer has to sabotage, because it's finally being seen. And slowly, gently, you begin to realize you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to pretend. You just have to be real, whole, human. And that is more than enough. Why we fear our shadow, and what happens when we keep running from it. Let's be honest. Facing your shadow isn't easy. It's not like flipping a switch. It's not always peaceful. In fact, it can feel terrifying. Because for most of our lives, we've been taught to turn away from anything uncomfortable. To push through it, to smile over it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. In fact, the more we run from it, the more power it gains. So why do we fear it so much? Why does looking at our own hidden side feel so unsafe? The answer is simple, but painful. Because when we were young, the parts of us that became shadow were often the parts that were rejected. Not by strangers, but by people we loved. When a parent scolded us for crying too loudly, when a teacher shamed us for failing, when we were told to grow up or toughen up or be quiet, we didn't just hear discipline. We heard, "This part of you is not lovable." And because we were children, and children need love to survive, we believed it. We internalized it. We began to fear our own feelings, our anger, our sadness, our neediness, our sensitivity, even our joy, so we buried them. We built walls, we wore masks, and over time we forgot what we even buried. But the body remembers, the nervous system remembers, and somewhere deep inside, we carry this hidden belief. If I look at my shadow, I'll be rejected again. If I feel too much, I'll lose control. If I admit what I really want, I'll be judged. That fear isn't weakness. It's protection. It's a wound trying to keep you safe. But the tragedy is, the more we fear our shadow, the more we live half-lives. We smile in public but cry in silence. We succeed on the outside but feel empty on the inside. We love, but we're always waiting to be abandoned. We create, but we never feel like it's enough. The shadow shapes how we love, how we work, how we see the world. It becomes the voice that says, "You can't. You're too much. You're not enough." And until we stop and listen, that voice runs the show. Jung said it clearly. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But here's what he also said, and this part matters more than anything. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you cannot become who you truly are without meeting the parts of yourself that you left behind. When you stop running from the shadow, something incredible happens. You begin to understand why you've struggled, why you've repeated certain patterns, why love has felt so hard, why peace has felt out of reach. You begin to soften toward yourself, and in that softness, you reclaim the power that was never lost, only hidden. You reclaim the right to feel, to speak, to create, to be angry, to be soft, to be bold, to be human. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. And honesty begins with courage. Not the loud kind, not the kind that rushes in and conquers, but the quiet kind. The kind that sits with the tears you've never let fall. The kind that listens to the stories you've never told. The kind that says, "I'm still here. And I want to know all of me." So today, if you're feeling afraid to face what's inside, that's okay. It means you're close, closer than you've ever been. And the truth is, your shadow has been waiting for you all along, not to hurt you, not to shame you, but to lead you back to the parts of yourself that still long to be seen, heard, and loved. Because that is where your wholeness begins, and you deserve nothing less. Part 4. Integrating the Shadow. How Wholeness Begins with Acceptance. 800 words. So now that we've seen the shadow, now that we've heard its voice, what do we do with it? Do we fix it? Change it? Fight it? No, we integrate it. This is the heart of Carl Jung's teaching. He didn't believe the shadow was something to defeat. He believed it was something to include. Because you are not meant to be split in two. You are not just the light, not just the version of yourself that's calm, kind, and collected. You are also the mess, the chaos, the fire, the emotion. And integration means saying, yes, this is me too. Yes, I can hold all of it. It doesn't mean you act on every impulse. It doesn't mean you lose control. It means you make peace with the parts of you that you've been at war with. And when that peace begins, so does true freedom. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop trying to hide. You stop editing your soul just to fit into the world, and you start living as a whole person. But what does integration look like in real life? It looks like noticing your triggers, and instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe. You ask, what's really happening inside me right now? It looks like letting yourself cry, even if no one understands why. It looks like saying no, even if it disappoints someone. It looks like sitting in discomfort, instead of escaping it through distraction or denial. It looks like accepting your jealousy and seeing it as a sign of your forgotten desires. It looks like admitting your anger, not as something shameful, but as something honest, something alive. It looks like writing in your journal and letting all the messy, imperfect truths come pouring out. Because once those truths are seen, they no longer control you. They no longer have to scream, because they're finally allowed to exist. Integration is a slow, quiet process. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. Moments where you choose honesty over performance, compassion over punishment, curiosity over fear. And the more you make space for your shadow, the more you make space for your full self. Your laughter becomes deeper. Your relationships become more real. Your creativity becomes richer. Your energy returns because you're no longer wasting it hiding. You begin to see that even the darkest parts of you had something to teach. The envy? It showed you what you really wanted. The anger. It showed you what boundaries were crossed. The sadness? It showed you what still needs healing. Your shadow, once feared, becomes a guide, a compass that leads you home, because what you thought made you broken is actually what makes you beautifully human. And when you integrate the shadow, you give others permission to do the same. You stop demanding perfection from the world. You stop judging people by what they show. Because you know they have shadows too. And instead of reacting, you start relating. Instead of controlling, you start connecting. And that is the beginning of wholeness. Jung believed that the path to becoming fully alive was not to become pure. It was to become whole. To bring together all the fragments, the light and the dark, the beauty and the pain, the strength and the softness. And when you walk that path, you don't just find yourself, you become yourself. Completely. You are not broken. You are becoming whole. Take a deep breath. You've made it this far. You've walked through ideas most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You've listened with an open heart. You've allowed yourself to wonder, could the parts of me I've been hiding actually be the key to becoming who I truly am? That question alone is an act of courage. You see, healing doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always about breakthroughs or big changes. Sometimes it's in the quiet decision to no longer run from yourself, to no longer pretend, to no longer split yourself in two. Carl Jung knew this. He knew that the greatest wound we carry is the belief that we must be someone other than who we truly are. So we polish ourselves, we shrink ourselves, we perform. We try to be light all the time, thinking it will make us lovable. But light without shadow is not real light, it's just surface. It's just performance. True light, soul light, comes only when you've walked through the darkness and still chosen to love what you found, because you didn't reject it this time. You didn't run, you stayed. And in that staying, in that presence, you reclaimed something sacred, your wholeness. Not perfection, not purity, but real living wholeness. Wholeness that can cry and still be strong. Wholeness that can feel anger and still be kind. Wholeness that doesn't need to be shiny to be worthy. And here's something even more beautiful. When you begin to accept all of yourself, you begin to accept others too. You stop needing them to be perfect. You stop judging what you used to fear. You recognize their shadow because you've met your own. You become softer, more open, more honest, and the relationships in your life begin to shift. They become more grounded, more human, more loving, because you're no longer showing up as a role, you're showing up as a person. A full, feeling flawed and radiant person. And that's freedom. Not the freedom to escape your past, but the freedom to live without shame. The freedom to express, to feel, to choose differently. The freedom to rewrite the story you were once trapped in. So if right now you still feel the pull of your shadow, if you still hear the whispers of old pain, old habits, old fears, please know, this is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're ready. Ready to see what's always been there. Ready to stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what have I abandoned in myself that is asking to be remembered? Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your map. It's your invitation. It's your teacher. And as Jung taught us, the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you've always been, without fear, without apology, without shame. So today, let this be your reminder. You are not broken. You are becoming whole. You are not behind. You are exactly where your soul needs you to be. You are not too much. You are finally learning to feel again. You are not lost. You are finding your way back to the truest, deepest, most beautiful version of you. And if no one has told you this yet, I am proud of you for staying, for listening, for not turning away. That alone is enough. And now, if you feel ready, take one more gentle breath. Place your hand over your heart and whisper something you haven't said in a long time. I accept all of me. Because this moment of honesty, of softness, of connection, is the beginning of your return, not to who you were told to be, but to who you really are. And the world needs that version of you, the whole one, the real one, the one who has met their shadow and chosen to keep going anyway. And if this message spoke to you today, if something inside you softened or stirred or simply whispered, yes, then I invite you gently to stay connected. Because this journey into the shadow is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong unfolding, and you don't have to walk it alone. Here in this space, we honor every part of you, the light and the dark, the joy and the ache, the questions and the becoming. So if you're ready, you can subscribe, you can leave a comment, just a few words about how this made you feel. Or share it with someone who might be quietly struggling in the dark. Sometimes, all it takes is one honest voice to remind us, we're not alone. You are not alone. And we're right here, walking beside you, always.